The Holy Gospel according to St. John, the 11th chapter.
Glory to you, Lord.
When Mary came where Jesus was and saw him, she knelt at his feet and said to him, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her also weeping, he was greatly disturbed in spirit and deeply moved. He said, "Where have you laid him?" They said to him, "Lord, come and see." Jesus began to weep. So the Jews said, "See how he loved him." But some of them said, "Could not he who opened the eyes of a blind man have kept this man from dying?" Then Jesus, again greatly disturbed, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone was lying against it. Jesus said, "Take away the stone." Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, "Lord, already there is a stench because he's been dead for 4 days." Jesus said to her, "Did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. And Jesus looked upward and said, "Father, I thank you for having heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I have said this for the sake of the crowd standing here, so that they may believe that you sent me." When he had said this, he cried with a loud voice, "Lazarus, come out." The dead man came out, his hands and feet bound with strips of cloth, and his face wrapped in a cloth. Jesus said to them, "Unbind him and let him go." This is the gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, O Christ.
Please be seated. Joyce Feinberg, Richard Gottfried, Rose Mallinger, Cecil Rosenthal, David Rosenthal, Bernice Simon, Sylvian Simon, Daniel Stein, Melvin Wax, Irving Younger, Jerry Rabinowitz, Maurice Stalin, Vicki Lee Jones, Mara Binkley, Nancy Van Vesten. We gather on this Sunday, All Saints Sunday, and recall the names of those who have gone before us. Some have gone before us, and while they hit our heart's dead center, we do find ourselves saying, it was their time and they lived a long life. And this does not negate our mourning. This does not say to those deaths that weigh heavy on our hearts that they do not matter. We know the place that those particular people, father, mother, partner, is filled with sadness, even as we lift up the promise that was made to us in the empty tomb of Christ by our God. We gather on this Sunday, All Saints Sunday, and we also recall the names of those who have gone before us, which leaves something else on our lips. Family members, friends, loved ones, strangers that have been ripped from our lives, that break our hearts into more pieces than we can count. It's that feeling of falling, and no matter how hard we try, we can't seem to put the pieces back together again. We resonate with Mary. We resonate, we find ourselves crying out to Jesus, "If you had only been here, they might not have died." Jesus resonates with these words. The gospel writer in the Gospel of John adds some explanatory language around it, but the truth is, the heart of the matter is, Jesus wept. His pain is evident, just as our pain is evident. And it just isn't Jesus wept, like watching a sad movie and one tear falls out of the eye and finds its place on the cheek. But rather, Jesus is weeping. Those gathered around see his tears and they say, see how he must have loved them. On All Saints Sunday, this Sunday, as we read the names, as you've heard the names of those who were killed at the Tree of Life Synagogue, at the Kroger's, at the yoga studio. As we read names later in the service, we realize and we know that we are gathered here. And as we are gathered here, Christ, who is ever present in this place, weeps. And when our hearts break, we might resonate with Lazarus in the story today. Lazarus is in the tomb. He's been wrapped in bands of cloth, not unlike the bands that wrap the baby Jesus in the manger. Lazarus has been prepared, and he's placed in the tomb, and Lazarus is dead. And when grief strikes us and cuts us to the core, we might find ourselves wanting to close in, shutting down to the world, giving up hope, light, and love. We might resonate with Lazarus. This tomb is comfortable. The tomb is dark. The tomb blocks out everything that once was painful and hurtful and jarring. And then Christ shows up. We believe that Christ has been present there the entire time, just as we believe Christ is present here. But in the story of Lazarus, the story of us, Christ shows up in a very powerful way. Christ calls out, and he does more than invite, he orders, move the stone. Now, excuses come out. Lazarus has been dead for 4 days. There's already a stink. Can you believe what Jesus is asking us to do? Has Jesus lost it? Is this not Joseph's son? As the excuses come out. When we are called as people of God to make way for new life, excuses can fly, can't they? This is going to make people really uncomfortable. I think Jesus has lost it. Does Jesus know who Jesus is calling? I mean, I'm just Wayne and Sherry's son. And does Jesus really know what he's doing? But Jesus orders, move that stone. And then Lazarus come out. Now, resonating with Lazarus just a bit, imagine for a moment that you are Lazarus. Lazarus is laying there, the day is over, the rest has begun. Now, Jesus doesn't even bother asking Lazarus if he wants new life. Jesus doesn't call out and say, hey, Lazarus, if you would like to get up, if you'd like to stretch a little, maybe if you're feeling like it, come out and take in the new day. No. Lazarus is in there. We don't even know if he wants to come out of the tomb. We don't even know if he wants new life. But Jesus he orders, Lazarus, come out. And the power of Christ's love that moves in our hearts, making it beat once again, causes Lazarus to come out. Christ calls us into new life. Christ beckons us. Christ orders us, come out. But you see, this isn't where the story ends. It doesn't stop with just Lazarus coming out of the tomb, which to me might seem enough. But he comes out. Can you imagine those around him? Those who are witnessing, those who could not believe that Jesus would have the audacity to do this. They would stop. They might look and they might say, Jesus doesn't know what he's doing. Jesus, there you go. You're messing around with things that you don't have the right to mess around with. But Jesus calls out and he orders not only Lazarus. Here Lazarus comes out. And these people that are on the fringe looking in, Jesus turns and says to them, unbind him and set him free. Unbind him and let him live this new life. We have been on both sides of that conversation. We have been people that have been bound, not able to live free in the ministry, and we've also been on the other side where we have kept people bound one way or another. Yet Jesus calls out to us, unbind them and set them free. Free to love, free to live, free to have hard conversations where what it means to have new life. Free to disagree with one another, but also free to help a society that would rather keep people bound. There are people outside of these four walls that are longing to hear the new life that Jesus has to offer them, that Jesus is calling them to experience. There are those who long or are bound by not having a livable wage. There are people who are bound by not having a place to lay their head. There are people who struggle with disabilities of all kinds, bodily and mentally, that are bound. There are the young that don't believe that they have a voice and they are bound. There are the old that feel that the world has passed them by and they are bound. There are people that are seen differently, whether it be by gender, by race, by sexuality, that people say you do not have a voice in this world, and they are bound. Yet Jesus says to them and says to us, be unbound and be set free. On this day, we, as the body of Christ, on All Saints Sunday, speak to the world. The world that would rather turn to violence than grace. The world that would rather turn to hate rather than love. The world that would rather claim darkness rather than the new life that Christ offers us. We, as the body of Christ, say to those who cannot seem to let themselves be unbound, we say, be unbound and be set free. For those who see only death and destruction, those who speak words of hate and hurtfulness, those who lift up division and speak a word of harshness, we as the people of God speak a different word. We speak of a God that loves the world. We speak of a God that brings us together. We speak of a God that, despite our differences, are called to this table, this meal. We speak of a God that on Easter morning rolled away another stone, that called out, and Christ resurrected gives to us new life. Christ calls you and I, be unbound and be set free. So on this day, All Saints Sunday, we lift up those who have gone before us and have joined the cloud of witnesses. Those saints that have taught us the faith where we can say, thanks be to God. And we will lift up those names. And on this day, All Saints Sunday, we also resonate with all of the baptized who claim new life that Christ has given us, Christ has thrust upon us. And we can say then to the world, come out. Be free. Be unbound in the gospel, the freedom of God's grace. That we, as the body of Christ, called to speak, called to say the word of grace and new life, we can say to those who still feel bound and shackled by whatever would be placed upon them, we can say with gusto, enough. Be unbound. Be set free. Live in grace and the gospel, loved for who you are, and able to see your neighbor as loved as well. For the God who will move the tomb, who will move that stone away from the tomb, the God who resurrects Christ into new life, says to you, I will stop at nothing to move and set you free. be unbound. And for the sake of the gospel, live as saints of God, because that is who you are called to be. That's who you are. And that's who we speak to the world as and say, be unbound and be set free.